Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am really looking forward to sharing my conversation today with Keri Lijinsky. She is the founder of Sweet Crimes, which is dedicated, and I love that name, Sweet Crimes. So what comes to your mind when you think of Sweet Crimes, which is dedicated to making simple, delicious, and affordable gluten-free baked goods that taste like, and this is the important part, just like you remember. So they don't taste highly different. They taste like what you remember of that particular cupcake or product. She left her profession in global public health, and we're going to talk about this quite a bit. We're going to get into her career path and then what led her to this, to focus on the science of gluten-free baking, which has become so hugely popular, when she discovered that she had a severe intolerance. The bakery has evolved since it's opened in 2016, thanks to a lot of great customer support, and she's very focused on rigorous product development. Her mission is for everyone to love her products, regardless of gluten intolerance. So welcome to the show today, Keri.
Thanks, Felina. Thanks so much for having me, and hello, everybody.
Hello. So let's do just that. Let's go back and take us along your career path, and maybe even start with, where are you from? Where'd you get started? And talk about your career, obviously, in global public health. And then we'll get into the, why this, why now conversation of launching your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Maryland, and I am the only child of two scientists. And I actually, sort of by accident, got into my public health career when I double majored in political science and French. And that took me to Geneva, Switzerland. And I sort of ended up in tuberculosis and HIV/AIDS control simply because I was there. And I... so my passion for a long time was public health and human rights and making sure that people had access to healthcare and the things that they needed. So in 2012, I got dengue fever, and my mother said, okay, after 11 years of being overseas, it's time to come home. I'm worried about you. And so I returned not quite to Maryland, but to Washington, D.C., where I was working for USAID. Again, for the AFSA Bureau in tuberculosis control. And so about halfway through my fellowship there, I started sort of tinkering around with gluten-free baking. I had problems, digestive problems my whole life, but couldn't nail it down. I, went to the doctor a number of times, and no one could really help me out. But I discovered that I was gluten intolerant in 2012, so it took me 32 years. To figure it out. And I just started doing it for free for friends who had kids who had celiac and things like that. But my first star product was for my mother's wedding cake. She got remarried in 2014. And I spent the whole week going through a bunch of recipes and sort of refining the flour blend and things like that. And it was such a big hit that I thought that I was kind of onto something. And so I just kind of continued that for a couple of years. I was still at USAID. And then, three or so years ago, I was faced with a dilemma, and that was, do I stay with USAID and become a direct hire, or do I quit and start Sweet Crimes full time? So I think we all know what happened.
We know the end of the story. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Was that a tough decision, Keri, or was it just like, okay, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do here?
It wasn't a tough decision at all, because I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs are working two full-time jobs. They're in their current job, and then after hours, they're doing their passion project full-time as well. So I didn't sleep for about 2 years. I was just hustling.
Yeah.
But I felt so energized. I was traveling to Africa all the time for work, and then I was, up till 5 in the morning at the kitchen producing for XYZ festival. And so, when push came to shove, I just felt all of this energy replenishing the sleep deprivation, and so it was kind of a no-brainer. I no longer felt, of course, I care about tuberculosis and I care about public health, but it was no longer returning that energy that I once had, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so I just took the plunge because it honestly seemed like I had no other choice. And I do want to be clear. I know a lot of people become entrepreneurs because they want to go off on their own. They want to be their own boss. That was never my problem. I always enjoyed having supervision. I always learned from my superiors and my mentors. And so that wasn't it at all. It was simply that, I would, at a farmer's market, I would come out with a new product or meet a new customer and they would cry because they hadn't had a donut in 12 years, or
Wow.
they hadn't had a cookie that tasted like their mother's chocolate chip cookie or something like that. And they would literally cry. I'm not kidding. They were so emotional about it. And it was just this is, I kind of describe it as a different kind of public health service. So bringing, traditional, what you remember, as you were describing in the introduction, just nothing fancy, just a chocolate chip cookie, just a basic cookie that you remember having, and it doesn't taste dry or like sawdust.
Yeah. Crumble in your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's been this journey. So
Wow.
yeah, it wasn't hard at all.
I'm glad to hear that. So I want to ask a few questions here, and sorry for the ignorance, but explain for our listeners the difference between gluten intolerance, and then I'm sure there's grades all the way up to what's referred to as celiac disease. Is that right?
Yeah.
So what does all that mean?
So gluten is a protein, and it affects people in different ways. So celiac disease is actually an autoimmune disease. And when you get tests, you can see that there's actually a lot of damage to your intestinal tract. And so you're causing your body a lot of harm by consuming the gluten. People with gluten intolerance, and I'm not a scientist again, so I'm sure there might be some listeners who are going to disagree with me here, but I don't think it's the same kind of damage that's happening if you have a gluten intolerance. Some people have a severe intolerance. For me, for some people it affects the skin, others it affects the joints. So it's all about inflammation. For me, it's my gastrointestinal tract. And so, I think that a lot of people, after consuming a lot of beer, they might feel bloated, or they've eaten something that makes them feel really bloated, and they might think that that's dairy related, but it's actually gluten related. And an interesting fact is that a lot of people who are gluten intolerant are also lactose or casein intolerant, which is what is found in dairy. And that's, I think, why a lot of people confuse the symptoms of lactose intolerance with gluten intolerance. So I am actually intolerant to casein and gluten.
And are there tests for this now? Did I hear you say?
Yeah, you can get a test for celiac disease. I don't believe that you can get a test for gluten intolerance. That's sort of the individual's responsibility to pay attention to the fuel that we're putting in our bodies and how we're reacting to that fuel. Yeah.
Makes sense. Absolutely. So I want to go to the name of your business, Sweet Crimes. And I love your website. I love your logo. It's kind of a little gangster-ish, but pink and orange. It's very, very cute. So talk about the inception of the brand.
Yeah. So I was in Rio actually for New Year's, and I was on my way to the airport after a lovely time. Headed back to the U.S. and my taxi cab stopped at a stop sign, and I looked to my left and I saw Sweet Crimes painted in graffiti on a garage door. And I was actually going to call my business something else entirely, Gula, which means sugar in Bahasa, because I spent so much time in Southeast Asia. And I thought, well, thank you, universe, because that is perfect. I love street art. I try very hard to not have girly branding. I mean, a lot of baking is sort of whites and pinks and blues and frosting and dripping and, all this stuff. And I like graffiti art. I like bright colors. And so, my new products, I know you're going to ask me a little bit about what's ahead, but I'm sort of rebranding a little bit now. And it's all based on street art and just funky art. So that's sort of the that's the
I love it.
of the brand development.
Yeah, through your travels. That's so great. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah. And, looking on your website, of course, your mouth starts to just, salivate as it should, right? I mean, you have some really beautiful products on your website. So take us through kind of the scope of, how your business works, where you, make your products, what kind of products you make, where you sell, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So as with many businesses, I started in a commercial kitchen. They're more like incubators. They're not just commercial kitchens, but for me, I have exactly zero background in food service. So this really was a completely new ball game, dealing with the Department of Health, et cetera. And so I started in these food incubators, and the difficulty is that, with any kind of allergy or potential for cross-contamination, you have to really go out of your way to make sure that your product is safe and that your process is safe. Yeah. So we had to invest in all of our own equipment, even though we were in a shared kitchen. And eventually I moved to the second commercial kitchen that I produced out of, which is called Mess Hall, and they had a separate gluten-free room. And there were a couple of other gluten-free producers in there, but still it was just so painstaking to walk back and forth in the oven, and it just took forever. We couldn't wash our dishes with everybody else. So now, I mean, as of 2 weeks ago, we moved in with Ice Cream Jubilee near U Street, and kind of between U Street and DuPont Circle in DC. And, they're just incredibly supportive of women-owned businesses, and we're so excited. We're actually opening our pop-up on November 1st. So this will be our first storefront presence, but we're actually in permitting for opening our own storefront in Capitol Hill.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that is, I mean, it really is about safety. My vision was not to have a storefront because my mission was to make sure that gluten-free products were accessible where people were just buying their coffee or going grocery shopping. I didn't want them to have to drive to my location. Yeah. But I realized that I was, just losing a lot of money, frankly, and it was simply inefficient not having a safe place to produce where people would feel confident that they were eating something that wasn't going to make them sick because of the space that we were producing in. Yeah. So the way that my recipes have evolved, I mean, I'm a bakery. I do everything. We just launched our flour blend, which you can get online. You can also get it at Glenn's Garden Market, which is a local grocery store. And I want people to be making sweet crimes themselves. So we're going to be coming out with a suite of dry mixes, for the holidays, hopefully. And, it's sort of Betty Crocker, add eggs and oil, and you can make stuff yourself. But really, because my company is very small, we've been very reactive to requests from customers. So the reason we have a donut is because I had customers begging me to come up with a donut. And actually, what's very exciting is that we, for the second year in a row, won Best Gluten-Free Sweet in DC with our donut.
Wow.
So that's the product that we took to LA recently. We take this to all the festivals. They're also vegan. And if you're vegan and gluten-free, you really haven't had a donut in a very, very long time.
I bet.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. So I want to go to a bit of the advice portion here. You had no experience in this business other than probably eating, right? So right. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that you'd like to share with somebody that maybe is in a different part of the world thinking about starting a food business?
Yeah, I would say that we started out in farmers markets, which I think is great because people go to farmers markets to try new things. They are there probably to spend more money than they would have to on a local small product, small business produced product. You also you make friends, you develop a customer base that cares about your success. And so that's really honestly where I bring any of my new products. I say, hey, this is something that I've just tried. What do you think? Give me the good, bad, and the ugly, and sometimes it's not good, and sometimes it's very good. You can also test out your packaging. What do you think about this serving size? Is there too much frosting on this carrot cake? Do people want it in carrot cake form, or do you want it in cupcake form or in a bin? It's so important to get that feedback from people. You might think that you have an excellent idea that tastes good to you and you've shared it with your family or your partner or whatever, but you really need the customer's feedback, because they're the ones who are going into a store. They don't know you personally. You don't have that personal connection, and you want to make sure that your food sells and your branding sells.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep. That's great advice. And I'm sure you've already shared a bit of the challenges of commercial kitchens and things of that nature. We'll just open up the example here, the question a little bit. Any kind of food, whether it's a gluten-free or not, talk a little bit more, if folks are interested or in exploring this, about the incubator concept, because we see these all over the country. In a variety of fashions. What else happens there besides just, a place to make product?
So I would say that initially they really catch you, the management always catches you with these promises of linking you up with financing or getting you into grocery stores or whatever it is. They always dangle that carrot. And honestly, in my experience, they don't go out of their way to provide that stuff. You kind of have to ask for it. So for example, when I first started and I had a full-time job, I didn't have 24-hour membership at the kitchen, and I honestly didn't have access to the management, to the resources that were there. I was at my job at USAID during their working hours. So I was, and even when I went to the full-time access, they were very responsive to questions that I asked, but they weren't they weren't taking initiative. Basically, they were just busy. They're not lazy. They just have a lot going on, and so do you. So I would say that in hindsight, had I had, more staff or whatever, I would have been able to take better advantage of their wisdom. However, I would say that the most important thing about being in a commercial kitchen is the other members, hands down. Hey, I like your packaging. Where do you buy your labels? Or, oh, I'm looking for a graphic designer. What do you da-da-da-da-da? Or, hey, you're a caterer. Do you ever get requests for gluten-free products? Yes, excellent. We can be an add-on. You don't have to pay us a lot. We don't have a minimum. You need 4 brownies. Great. We have them. We can provide that for you. It's just, and they're foodies. So they will also be very truthful with you about your product. They're happy to be guinea pigs. They want to eat all of it. So I definitely advocate for the incubator kitchen.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you for that feedback. Cause you hear a lot about these things, and I've had a lot of people ask me about going into an incubator, specifically in a kitchen situation. And from the outside, it looks like a phenomenal opportunity. So I want to go back just a bit on the product side. And I noticed you also do loaf cakes and pies and quiches. Are you only local in the DC market? Do you ship? How does all that work?
Yeah, so we ship everything but fancy cakes. Anything with frosting. Even the carrot cake we can ship. It's the loaf carrot cake because we put the frosting on the side and then we make sure that it's chilled and et cetera, et cetera. But everything else we ship. And that is, we want, more than being in local retailers, actually, we want to get our product out nationwide. I want to be the Betty Crocker of gluten-free baking. I want it to be easy. I want this product to be accessible to a household. So the family with one kid that has celiac disease and has to have a separate cookie that is not as good, tempting that child to make himself sick. I really want my product to be appreciated and loved by everybody in the household, so everybody can eat the same thing. So yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Because I am staring directly at your carrot cake with cream cheese frosting loaf, and I'm getting ready to add it to my cart. I kid you not.
Yeah.
I love carrot cake.
Yes. Yes. And that was our first product in retail, and it is absolutely wicked.
I cannot wait. I will order as soon as we are done chatting here. It was my birthday recently, so I feel like it's justified, and I didn't have any carrot cake on my birthday, so this is my it's my opportunity. Awesome. Well, Keri, talk a little more about some of the things you mentioned, a few things, but what else is on the horizon for the business?
Yeah, so the storefront certainly, and then the dry mixes. And I'm really thinking about, how to wholesale my flour blends, because I would love for, I am not a pastry chef. I did not go to culinary school. I think I do a pretty darn good job, but I want other people, I want the professionals to do it. So I would love for people, for brides, for example, to want to pay a premium for a cake made with sweet crimes flour, a sweet crimes cake. So that's something that I would love to do going forward. As anybody who's ever worked in the food industry knows, the margins are so small.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pennies on the dollar. And so, I kind of describe our process now as baking the results, but in 5 or 10 years, I don't want to be baking anymore. I want people to be buying my dry mixes and baking themselves. That way I'm not impacted, for example, by the fluctuating price in vanilla extract. People can use the kind of fat, the kind of oil that they prefer. And, I really just want this to be accessible for families, for people who are hardworking and don't have a lot of time and want something delicious, and safe, basically, and healthy. So
love it. I have no doubt you will get there. Fantastic. So Keri, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, they want to order any of your amazing products, where do they go?
So they can go to sweetcrimes.com. Unbelievably, that domain name was still available.
So awesome.
I know, right? I'm so lucky. And they can also go to our Instagram, which is Eat Sweet Crimes. It's the same handle for Twitter and for Facebook. I monitor all of these platforms, and people reach out to me, in all sorts of ways. So if you go to the website, there's also a phone number and an email. I do get a lot of requests for random, family recipes, and hey, I haven't been able to make my grandmother's XYZ cake for a long time. Can you help me out? And I go out of my way to help people. In fact, on Monday, you'll love this. Sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but on Monday,
great.
there is a little girl whose father wanted to gift her a cooking lesson for her birthday, and they met me at the DC Gluten Free Expo several weeks ago, and she said, "Daddy, I've never had a donut that good, and I would love to have a day at Sweet Crimes." So this little girl and her dad are coming to our kitchen on Monday, and she is going to shadow me, and I think I'm just going to have her make her own birthday cake.
That's so awesome.
Use the flour blend and decorate, and I can train her how to do that. And so I'm really excited to be giving back in that way. So
yeah. The whole new business model there.
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for your time, Keri.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.